So the theme this month is unstoppable financial flow. You okay, Mom? There's always somebody in the audience. You don't expect it to be your mom, but there's always somebody in the audience. Would you like to unwrap a candy wrapper now? Would you open a box? Is there anything you'd like to do? Do it now. Right. Is your phone turned off? Oh my goodness. I'm just so glad to be here this morning. Love y'all so much. Oh, this is so much fun. So much fun. I could not ask for a better life than I have right now. Could not ask for a better life than I have right now. So, and you all are a major part of that. So thank you. Thank you. Okay, and may I say the theme now? The theme this month is unstoppable financial flow. And as I said at the very beginning of the service, the reason this is so important to me is not because I'm greedy or money hungry. I do love talking about money, and I actually do love money. I love having it, spending it, using it, utilizing it, right? And what I have walked through and what I see happening right now is there is so much fear that is being stoked in people by the media, by politics. There's so much fear, and rightfully so. I mean, this is not, this is not, I'm not saying it's not expected to feel fearful when you hear about all the layoffs, when you hear about cuts that are being made, when you hear that there's a threat potentially to Social Security, to Medicare, to these things that we have been used to, right? That we've been used to, that are our safety net that support us financially. So when I hear this happening and I hear from so many people who are feeling fearful, and rightfully so, what I recall is hearing at different times in different places and spaces as an entrepreneur things like, well, there were people who did just fine during the Depression, right? There are people who weren't impacted by the Great Recession. There are people who did just fine during these certain ups and downs and ebbs and flows of life, right? And so what I know is that if it's happened anywhere, it can happen anywhere, right? And if that's happened before, it can happen now. And so what I'm very interested in for this community, because I love each of you and I love you so much, I want you to really, really get that God is your source. God is your source, not your job, not your paycheck, not the Medicaid or the Social Security or your investments or your inheritance. That is not your source. Your source is God. And those things I just named, those are channels. Those are channels that God as source uses to bring money into your awareness, into your experience, right? And so once we get anchored in God as source, we don't have to live and lurch from news story to news story, right? We don't have to lurch from fear to fear. We don't have to lurch from anxiety to anxiety once we get anchored in the idea and the concept and the truth that God is source. So let's talk about that. So source, sorry, Scott, keep moving the microphone. So source is defined as a generative force, a cause, a point of origin, right? It's a place from which all things flow or all things are created. That is source, right? That is a source. A channel is a passageway. A passageway, it's a means of access. It's a delivery system, if you will, right? So source is the ground of being. Source is the all that is. Source is that from which all things flow, right? And just in terms of defining it, from defining the English language, a channel is a delivery system, okay? So here's the thing. When you think about the places that you receive money from, just yell out like we like to do here. Just yell out, where do you receive money from? Like, where does it come from? Work, your job, Social Security, gifts, retirement, right? Interest, investments, annuities, right? So these are the places that your money appears, right? That sustains you. Yes? Yeah? And so here's the thing. What's interesting is the world teaches us to put our faith in those channels. Whether it's our business, our job, the government, the world teaches us to put our faith in the channel. And so when we put our faith in the channel and we mistake the channel for the source, there's a cascading effect of things that happen when we do that, right? So one thing that happens when we mistake the channel and we think that channel is the source, one thing that happens is we live in a state of fear, as I just described, right? We live in a state of fear. We wake up every morning and we get the news pings on our phone, or we see the news and we hear all this news about the recession and inflation, and eggs are like $1,000 a carton, and if you can find them, right? And the tariffs, and we hear all this stuff, and we live in a constant state of churn and fear. And then we hear that there's the specter of cuts that are happening, there's layoffs, and we forget that God's economy is not the human economy. It's not the human economy. And so the more that we're aligned with God as source, with God's economy, then the more channels open up to deliver to us that which we need, right? Another thing that happens when we mistake the source for the channel, right? We think that channel is really the source, is we create false idols, right? We create false idols. This is what is meant by worshiping mammon, right? By worshiping false idols. We begin to think that the job or this person or this entity is the source of our good. And so then we begin to behave in certain ways to be in alignment with that person, that entity, that organization, right? And then we're doing everything for that boss, for that job, for that person, for that whatever, for that spouse. Wherever that money is, it's coming to us. We do everything related to that. We want to please that person, that place, that space, right? And that is a form of worshiping a false idol, because that is not the source. That is the delivery system. That is the delivery system, right? And if you are bound by that delivery system, you're never on solid ground. Because what if your rich husband is upset with you, right? Or you want to get a divorce? What if your investments go down because of the crazy stuff going on politically, right? What if your business falls apart for whatever reasons? What if you lose your job and get laid off? Right? If you are worshiping the source, and when I say worship, I don't mean like bowing down. But I do mean like you're so wired into that is the only way that I can be supported. That is the only way I can have financial support. That is a form of worship. It is a form of worshiping, of aligning with a human source that is always going to fail. It is always going to fail. It will not stand. God is eternal. God always stands. The source cannot be extinguished. The source cannot be used up. It is abundant and it is eternal. So when we make these false idols out of money and jobs and people, and we put our faith there, we will always be disappointed, because a job can come and go. As we have seen multiple times in the last 20 years, unthinkable things have happened, right? In 2008, we had never experienced like the economy like literally almost crashed. It did, right? But almost a total collapse. And who knows what we're facing now? These are things that were just unthinkable. And now we're standing here going, oh my gosh, right? So these are channels, and we don't put our faith in channels. Another thing that happens when we confuse the source and the channel is we separate ourselves from divine supply, right? And then scarcity thinking starts kicking in. There's not enough. The world is a pie, right? This whole pie theory, which is completely wrong. The world is not a pie, right? Abundance is not a pie. So if I get a big fat piece, it doesn't take anything from you because it's not a pie, right? It's just abundant. Or it's like, what is that? What restaurant is that with the refillable salad bowl, endless salad? Olive Garden, right? So the endless salad, right? That's what the world is. It's an endless salad. Yeah, it doesn't end. So if you get a salad and 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 then you get 5, it doesn't take anything away. There's more salad, right? There's more salad. Yes, exactly. Exactly. The babies know what I'm talking about. There's more. There's always more, right? And so when we separate ourselves from divine supply, not only do we think of the world as a pie, as finite, as if I get more, someone else will have less, or if they get more, I'll have less. Not only that happens, then we begin to compete, right? It sparks competition, because if the world's a pie And if your larger piece is going to mean I lose, I got to compete with you for that larger piece, right? And I'm going to find by any means necessary, I'm going to compete. If it means I have to dominate you, if it means I have to enslave you, if it means I have to oppress you, if it means I have to whatever it is, that's what I'm going to do to win because it's a finite world. Right? That's the thinking that happens when we're separated from our divine supply. Now I have to compete. Right? That's one of the things that happens. And greed begins to kick in, which drives all of this, which says, I have got to hoard this stuff or I will lose. Right? I got to have the most toys when I die. Right? Got to have the most toys when I die and make sure I have enough toys and make sure my kids have enough toys, and I got to make sure I have enough, and I got to make sure I have enough, right? And here's what's interesting. When you look around at what is happening right now and you look at some of the wealthiest people in the world and the behaviors that we are seeing, it's really lack and limitation thinking, right? Now, the experience is not that, but the thinking is lack and limitation, right? I've got to own everything. I've got to take all the money. I've got to take all the things. I've got to make sure these people don't get ahead. That's lack and limitation thinking. That's not thinking from God as source. Even though it appears that these folks have lots of money, the thinking is lack and limitation. The thinking is saying it's a finite world. I got to end with the most toys, and I got to take them from everybody else, right? And that is not true. That is absolutely not true. So when we say God is your true source, God is your source, what are we talking about? What does that even mean? It means, Ernest Holmes says, the source from which our supply comes is infinite. The source from which our supply comes is infinite. This is what Ernest Holmes says in The Science of Mind. Lack is an illusion. God's abundance is limitless. That is the true nature of the cosmos, is abundance. Look around. Look around. In Santa Cruz, can you count the number of grains of sand on the beach? Right? Can you go outside and count the number of leaves you see? Can you count the number of molecules in the air? Right? You can't even count the number of cells in the body. Right? Life is abundant. That is the natural order. So when we say God is source, it is saying the universe is inexhaustible. It is limitless. It knows no bounds. It has no confines. That's what Ernest Holmes says. In the Bible, it talks a lot. If you go to the Bible and look, there's so many quotes about abundance. It is astounding. There's so many quotes about God as source, right? In Psalm 16:2, it says, every good thing I have is a gift from you. Philippians 4:19, my God shall supply all of your needs according to his riches and glory. Right? Everything is speaking and pointing to abundance everywhere. Do you all know who Wallace Wattles is? Anybody know who that is? Yes. Wallace Wattles wrote a book called The Science of Getting Rich. Is that right, Gail? Yeah. The Science of Getting Rich. And it was a foundational piece to The Secret. Everybody know The Secret? Yeah. Yes? Okay. So in Wallace Wattles says, the source from which wealth comes is infinite, and the channels are unlimited. Right? The source from which wealth comes is infinite, and the channels are unlimited. Hear this, the channels are unlimited because God creates the channels. If God is infinite and God is the source and God also is the channel and creates the channels have to be infinite. They're only smaller, they're only finite because of our thinking. Right? The channels are only finite because of our thinking, because we think, oh, the only way I can make money is from this job, right? Oh, the only way I can make money is from this thing. The only way I can do this is from this thing. This is the only way I can do whatever it is, right? That we limit the channels, and so it's done unto us as we believe, right? But the source from which wealth comes is infinite, and the channels are unlimited. And so when you understand that God, not your paycheck, not your company, not the economy, is your source, you become unshakable, right? You become unshakable, and you can create your own economy. There are people who are thriving through every downturn in history. My grandfather's family in Alabama, Montgomery, Alabama, in the thick of Jim Crow, in the Depression, thrived. They owned a butcher shop, and they thrived during the Depression. I heard this story my whole life, right? Because the Frasers decided, my mom's family, the Frasers is the surname, decided they weren't going to suffer. And so they thrived during the Depression. My grandfather went to an Ivy League university from Alabama, in Jim Crow, Alabama. Are y'all following what I'm saying here? Right? God is your source, not man. And when you get centered in that, all kinds of things open up, right? All kinds of doors open, all kinds of walls fall down, all kinds of opportunities happen, channels open up that you cannot even imagine when you're aligned with the all that is. But you've got to align with source, and you've got to not give so much power to these channels. And I don't mean don't do a good job and don't be excellent at your job. I don't mean don't take care of your financial responsibilities. I'm not talking about being irresponsible. I'm not talking about being fantastical, right? I'm talking about just get your mind right and get your priorities right. Yeah? And so here's the thing. This sounds really good. It sounds really good to sit in this room and say God is your source. But what does this mean? How do we practice? And y'all know I'm a coach, so let's talk about it, right? Let's talk about, like in coaching, we call it the move, right? What are the moves you're going to make, right? So that you actually have this experience I'm talking about. Well, here is the thing. If you want to have unstoppable financial flow no matter what happens with the economy, then you've got to do some things. And the first thing is you have got to trust God as your source. And how do you do this? You have to be in relationship with it. I say this every week in a different way, right? You've got to be in relationship with it as your source. What this means is, you can choose to do whatever you want, but I tell you, if you're running to God when there's an emergency and then begging and supplicating, you're coming to God in lack, and you will only demonstrate more lack. Right? You're putting lack into the law. So you're coming to God, you're not doing your meditation really. You don't have a fluent relationship with spirit. Now, mind you, spirit is always available. It's always available. And it's never judging you. It's never saying, well, you didn't talk to me then. No, I'm not, We love to anthropomorphize God, right? We love to make God be a human being. God is not sitting around going, well, you didn't talk to me last week, and so now I'm not going to bless you this week. Like, that is not God. That is like your mom, not my mom, but your mom, right? Get that straight. But here's the thing, y'all. You got to be in relationship with source in order for it to have fluency in your life. In order for it to show up as these various channels, you've got to be in relationship with it. You have to know it intimately. It knows you intimately. It already knows you, right? But you have to do the work. What this means is, are you meditating on a regular basis? I don't mean sitting there meditating and then looking at your phone and meditating. No. Sitting and being receptive to the divine so that you learn to hear its voice. So that you learn to hear that intuition, so that you learn when it nudges you to buy this stock or do this thing or don't move left or move right, that you hear the voice and you can then move on it because you are fluent in the language that it speaks to you, right? And you can't get fluent in any language if you don't practice. Practice is meditation. Practice is doing your prayer work. And if you're not doing that, then when the channel shifts, when the things happen, and they will. We are human beings having a human experience, and humans are going to human, right? Humans are going to human, right? And when things shift, when the layoff happens, when the business falls apart, when the economy does this, when all these things happen, you don't then want to be running to God, supplicating and begging to save you, because you're running in lack. You're steeped in lack. You will only get lack. You will not have the abundance and the ease and flow that you desire. So now is the time to start cultivating that relationship. And I will tell you, for this entire month, in my morning meditations, we are focusing solely on God as source, on money, on abundance, on financial supply. That is what we're working on for the whole month, right? And I will be doing energy clearings. I'll be doing meditations so that you can get anchored in the absolute truth. I feel like we're going to need this. And I feel like the world, if you're okay financially and you're fine through all of this, fantastic. But we also need you to be in the world with a consciousness of God as source. Because there may come a time where there's a lot of fear and a lot of panic sweeping, and that's not the time you want to try to find solid ground, right? You want to get to solid ground now. So I invite you in to the meditations on a daily basis so that you can get yourself anchored in the absolute truth. God's got your back. God's got your back. There is no way that God would create you and me and all these things. There's no way God would create us and not fully support us, right? There's no way. There's no way. When it came to me to start this center, I think I shared with y'all, I was walking from my bedroom to my living room, and I passed my kitchen counter, and you know, I heard, oh, you're going to start a center, and I was like, what? And I grabbed the bar, I grabbed a counter bar or stool, right? And I'm like, what? You know, because the thoughts just started flowing, like it started downloading in that moment, and I was like, whoa, what, right? And I was like, okay, and I at once knew that was absolutely right, and I also was at once terrified. Like both of those things existed, right? And I was texting with my uncle, who's a minister and biblical scholar in Illinois, and he wrote back and he said, Rasheryl, if God provides the vision, He'll provide the provision, right? If God provides the vision, He will provide the provision. And I was like, thank you, Uncle Richard. Thank you, Uncle Richard. Right? Right? Because that divine intelligence that created us, that source that is that from which all things generate, all things grow, all things are created, that is the all-knowing, all-intelligent source, and it knows you intimately because it made you. It created you. Right? It created you, so it knows how to care for you, just like it cares for the birds and the lilies of the field and the trees and all of the things. It knows you and it knows what you need. You need to be open to it, right? And so part of that is achieved by meditation practice. The second thing, this is a harder thing to get. The second thing that will help you experience unstoppable flow despite the economy is counterintuitive. It is participating in the law of circulation, right? Which means that you set the cycle going by giving and receiving, giving and receiving. So here's the thing that's counterintuitive about that. It feels like when there's scarcity around us, or we see it, or our channel has been interrupted, or it's threatened, everything feels like shut it down, right? Stop, just stop. Don't spend any money, just hoard everything, save everything, save everything. That's what it feels like, right? That's our impulse. That's the move that we typically make. And I will tell you, if you can push through that fear and instead give in faith, knowing you are giving from a place of supreme sourcing, right? You're supremely sourced. And you give from that place with an open heart and an open mind, and joyfully, it will be returned to you in ways that you cannot even imagine, right? In ways that you cannot even imagine, overflowing abundance. And this is counterintuitive because when we see lack, we want to shut down and save everything, not give. And giving is what opens it up. And so as an entrepreneur, for me, this has been a lesson I have learned time and time and time again, because being an entrepreneur is a spiritual path. It is a path of faith that you are walking. It is a path of faith that you are trusting the ground is going to come up to meet you. It is a path of faith where you have a vision. There's something that you know you want to birth out into the world, and you don't know how it's going to be supported. But you're willing to take a step and do that thing, right? And then you do it over and over and over and over and over again, and you have to make a living and support some other people, perhaps, right? Pay salaries, pay payroll, pay other people, right? So that is a very spiritual walk when you're an entrepreneur. And so one of the things I learned, which I've shared with all of you, in 2010, I lost my business. I lost everything. My house was, I had to short sell my house. And then I'd done everything right. I bought, the smallest, not so great house in a fabulous neighborhood. Then I had to short sell it. I lived right down the street from this Jesuit college that was always easy to like rent or sell a house there because it was a great location in Shaker Heights, Ohio. I had to sell that house in a short sale. Lost money. I had to bring money to the table to get out of it in 2010. I was so stressed out because the firm I was working for, consulting firm, had lost so much business during the recession, it wasn't coming back. So executive coaching, leadership development, training, it was wiped out. Like, even though corporations had plenty of cash during the recession because they were being bailed out, right? The banks and everybody's being bailed out, but they weren't spending it on the gravy things like executive coaching, leadership development. Those of you in the room who are corporate know exactly what I'm talking about, right? And so those years from 2008 to 2010 or 11 were brutal. I was so stressed out that my car was repossessed on my birthday. I didn't even realize it was my birthday. Like, I was so stressed, I had completely forgotten it was my birthday, right? And I was just like, what on earth has happened? I had savings, all this stuff. In 2 years, everything was just like, oh my goodness. So I sold everything I possibly could that I had left. I got me and my 2 little dogs in a rental car. My mom flew from Santa Cruz to Cleveland. I picked her up at the airport, and we started driving back across country because I was moving to her house, right? Because I had lost everything, right? And when I got to Santa Cruz, she had this beautiful house, and I remember laying in my bed, looking out the window, and just devastated doesn't even describe it, right? Just like at the lowest low of like, what on earth? Like, what am I gonna do now? Like, what do I do? Like, and why? What is happening? Like, it was just all such a, just a low point, right? And my mom was teaching 4T Prosperity at CSL Santa Cruz. And so I took the class. And I knew about tithing. I've grown up, I'm in a tithing family. And so I tithe, and it's not a big deal. But when I was losing money, I was listening to my friends who were consultants, who were losing. I was holding on to everything. I was listening to the news. I was watching all the predictions, and the economy's collapsing. So I was involved in all of that for a couple of years, really consuming this stuff. And so I get to Santa Cruz, and I go into 4T, which I had taken before, years before, and so I'm tithing, like $1 or whatever it is, right? Just whatever it is, and really getting to, oh, right, God is my source, like recalibrating, reorienting myself, re-understanding what is true, re-understanding what my source is, because the channels had been taken away, right? And I had to really get to what is source, right? What is source? Because it's providing all of the resources. And from that, I was able to go through that 12 weeks and get back into that practice. And it is a mystical practice of tithing because it activates the law of circulation. And many people think tithing is about the church. It's not. It's about your relationship with source. It is about your relationship with source, right? And so what you are doing in tithing is you are giving to the place that is spiritually feeding you. You are giving to that channel through which your spiritual nourishment is coming. And it is a divine and sacred act between you and the divine of saying, thank you, God, for the spiritual nourishment that is feeding my life, that is nurturing my life, that is strengthening me and giving from that place, right? That is what tithing is. It is not philanthropy. It's not giving to philanthropy is wonderful, but it's not giving to a cause that you care about. It is giving to your spiritual nourishment, to your spiritual source, and it is a sacred act between the giver and the divine, right? It is not about the church. It is about where you're being spiritually fed and feeding into that, and you will see that you will have increase after increase after increase. In less than 10 months, I went from nothing to a multi-six-figure business. The next year, I had 2 different licensing deals with a Fortune 100 company you all know, where I licensed training programs to them that came out of the blue, like literally fell into my lap. I had one of these clients that literally wrote the deal. I didn't know how to structure that kind of deal. And I called a colleague who helped me structure my first licensing deal. I wrote it on a napkin. I was at Agape's what is it called? Agape's Revelation, right? Agape's Conference Revelation. And I was about to go down, and a colleague called me. I was about to go down to sessions. A colleague called me, and literally told me exactly how to structure the deal and what to say to my client, because I'm like, I don't know even how to do this. And I took it to the client. The client sweetened the deal, told me how to rewrite it. I rewrote it and gave it to them. Listen, I'm telling you, this has been my experience, right? Unbelievable things, because I am anchored in God as my source, right? God is my source. And really anchored in that, and really understanding the divine, and letting it guide my actions and my thoughts and what I'm doing. And it brings other people into the experience. Yeah. So I'm not talking to you about what I think. I'm not talking to you about what's theoretical. I'm talking to you about what I've learned and what I've lived. And I will always do that. I will always talk to you about what I have learned, what I have lived, and the mistakes I have made, right? And what I've learned from that. Not something I think, not some words I just think. And anybody who knows me, y'all know that's how I roll. I think I've had lunch or dinner with almost everybody in here. So that's how I am. So this is the point I'm saying, y'all. You got to activate that law of circulation, right? And it may look like, you know what? I can freely give this amount, or do this amount, or do this philanthropy, or do this kind of giving, right? Start where you are. But you've got to activate the law of circulation. You can't hold and go, oh my God, I don't have enough money. Oh my God, I don't have enough money. Oh my God, I don't have enough money. And then think the law is going to then deliver you enough money. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that, right? Are y'all following what I'm saying? Great. All right. So if you believe that money is scarce, it's going to be scarce. If you believe that God's supply is endless, it will open every door for you. And so I want to invite you in to this practice of circulation, There was a class I took once called something about, oh my gosh, I can't think of the name of it. There's a book that goes with it. Something about getting out of debt or something. This was years ago. But in any event, the practice that the author suggested is when you pay your bills, like only pay your bills. This is back in the days of writing checks. Remember that? And when you pay your bills, like you sit down and get into a place of just being so grateful to pay that bill, right? So grateful, right? Because if you're paying a mortgage, that means you got a house. If you're paying rent, you got a place to live. If you're paying a car loan, you got a car. If you're paying credit card bills, there's something that you've received with those credit cards that you're enjoying, that you were given money to get before you had it, right? And so to really get into the mode of like just sitting down and paying your bills with joy. And I started practicing that, just like loving paying my bills, right? And that again moves you into law of circulation. So I invite you into that practice this week. So here's the thing, y'all. If you begin to practice these things that I'm talking about, right, the meditation, the law of circulation, all of these things, you will see that multiple channels will begin to open up, things that you could not even conceive or think of. This is what I have walked through many times in my business. There's business people in here right now I know who've had the same experience, right? Things that it's not even on your radar for something to happen, and boom, here it is. Here's this great opportunity, right? Here's this great deal. Here's this great thing that's happening. But you got to walk and live and breathe and be an anchor in God as source. When God is the source, it will open up channels you cannot even imagine. But you have to be open to it. If you're only open to, the only way I can make money is this one thing. It's my job. It's my this. I can't do this because I can only do this, right? If that's your thinking, that will be the result you get. Remember the law of mental equivalence? Right? The law of mental equivalence says that for every external thing, there is a mental equivalent. There's a thought in back of it. So if you're thinking scarcity, if you're thinking there's only one channel, that will be your experience. It's going to outpicture, right? So I invite you now into knowing that there are a multitude of ways that God can bless you. There are a multitude of ways that God can bless you. And what I really want for this community is to get that no matter what happens in the government, no matter what happens with your business, no matter what happens with Social Security, Medicaid, retirement, investments, the economy, no matter what happens, God's got you, right? God's got you and is holding you and is loving you and is providing for you, and it will show up it will create itself into the channel needed for you to receive your good. I'm telling you what I know. All right, I'm telling you what I know. And so what I want is for us to walk in this awareness and walk in this truth during this time of turbulence, because it's turbulent and it's going to get more turbulent. And so we need to have our abundant spacesuits on, right? Have our feet anchored firmly in source, and have our minds open to being blessed in ways we cannot even conceive. Are y'all with me on this? Yes. All right. Excellent. Well, let's turn within for prayer, shall we? I think I've said enough.